Welcome to Confessions of a Founder, where we dive deep into the stories, challenges, and triumphs of successful entrepreneurs and the lessons they've learned along the way. You are going to love today's guest. This was one of the most insightful, value-filled conversations we've featured to date on Confessions of a Founder. Meet Vivek Pandit, co-founder and COO of Petal. Petal is reimagining how corporate America connects with young job seekers through social media. In Petal's business model, the influencer is the modern-day headhunter. They share the job with their community and receive a cut if one of their audience members is hired for the role. In addition, Petal uses AI to match and vet thousands of applications to deliver the best candidates at half the cost and a quarter of the time. And it's working. They've partnered with some of the biggest brands in the world to hire talent, including Google, Audible, Paramount, and Synchrony, to name a few. Vivek is an incredibly thoughtful and successful leader. He's a Forbes 30 Under 30 entrepreneur, TEDx speaker, and the award-winning author of We Are Generation Z: How Identity, Attitudes, and Perspectives Are Shaping the Future. His insights into finding product market fit, building for culture and impact, and the fundraising process are sure to resonate with and inspire many of you. Without further ado, Vivek, welcome to Confessions of a Founder.
I'm very, very excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
I love it. Okay, so you are the founder of Petal, co-founder. Can you tell me a little bit about how you got started in this journey and how you decided that this was the right thing to work on for you?
Yeah, for sure. So I graduated Brown 2020, and I was much like, I went to great school, finding jobs would be easy. I lived that high horse, I guess. And then got out in the job market and was like, wow, finding a job is really hard, and finding one that you find some purpose in or fulfillment in, right? And so I basically realized, me and my co-founder were like, recruiting is like a big game of hide and seek. I can't find employers can't find me. The irony is nobody's trying to hide, so we must be seeking in the wrong place. So our whole thing was, okay, how can we help? We started off with, essentially we're a diversity recruiting company. So our primary focus is how can we help underprivileged communities, people of color, women find opportunities that they're not necessarily exposed to. When we were doing that, we started suffering the same issues that other recruiting platforms were having. How do we find these candidates? And we did the traditional means of emails and, going to fairs and things like that. But then we realized we were getting the most traction when we were just reaching out to people on social media, because that's where people live. People live on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube. And so we asked the question, we basically realized, instead of thinking, where do people go when they're looking for jobs, like a career fair or like Indeed or LinkedIn, where do people just go in general? And that's social media. And they might not be looking for a job when they're on social media, scrolling at 2 a.m., half asleep, but that's where they are. And they probably need a job because everyone needs a job right now. And so we discovered the power of social media as a talent magnet, as a recruiting tool. And so we were basically the first company to come into HR and be like, we're going to use influencer marketing to make your jobs go viral. And we're going to be very candidate Gen Z focused, unlike a lot of recruiting platforms that I think cater mostly to the employer. We're very okay, how do we speak to our generation? So if you hear a recruiting competitor go into a VC room, they're going to say, the problem is employers spend too much money. It's the time to fill is too long, and all that's relevant and great. But you're never going to hear someone say Gen Z candidates that are applying to jobs feel like they get ghosted from 99% of the opportunities they apply to. Right. So these are pain points that Gen Z feels that we're communicating and finding solutions to. And that solution was bringing influencer marketing, social media, and the Gen Z lens to HR, people that have never really experienced putting opportunities on social media or even discuss what influencer marketing would look like. So that's in a nutshell, kind of our path the past couple of years and where we've landed now.
You've worked with some pretty big clients. You've worked with Audible, you've worked with Paramount, you've worked with Synchrony Bank. So it sounds like something is clicking here. What has been what is the product today? And what has been the process to finding this current product market fit?
Yeah. So right now, the way that it works, a company, one of these companies that you named, will send me a job opportunity, right? Then we take that job opportunity and we share it with influencers in our network. A lot of these influencers are like the leaders of Career Talk or like the LinkedIn top voices that have an HR background, but now have discovered social media as the way to like disseminate knowledge in terms of how to become a better candidate for something. Now they want to provide jobs. So we provide them with job opportunities. And then let's say you're scrolling on TikTok, Instagram, or LinkedIn. All of a sudden, just like a consumer product pops up, the job opportunity pops up. And you're like, oh, this sounds really cool. You should work at the New Jersey Devils. You should work at Paramount. Then you go to their LinkedIn bio. And then if you've already created an account on our thing, you can just quickly apply in seconds on the influencer's job board. So essentially, influencers are like the new headhunters, and social media is like scaling word of mouth. Instead of me telling my 5 friends about a job, why does an influencer tell their 500,000 friends about a job, right? And then apply on platform. So that's essentially what we're doing now. I give a lot of credit to my co-founder and CEO, Shisa. He has done an incredible job the past several years of building relationships, networking, building trust. He's really good at that. And so we were able to, get connected with some of these top end clients. And then once we did it once, and they saw the results, testimonials spoke for themselves. Clients started coming in inbound. So we were also on the New Jersey Devils, the hockey team, their helmet. So they gave this out to all the fans. There's like 9,000. I don't know if you can see, but there's our logo on the helmet. We're on their helmet.
Oh my God.
Oh, it's so cool. We had like a whole pedal night where like one of the games, it was all dedicated to pedal. We were on the big screen, we rode the Zamboni. It was super cool. But things like that, right, are like the reasons why the product speaks for itself. When Pedal can deliver an employer 200 candidates in 5 days, 100 plus of them, 150 of them are qualified, and 197 of them were women or people of color. That's something they've never seen before. And so, once we started doing that, this thing just started becoming a well-oiled machine, and here we are.
You have to find two sides to the market there, right? You have to find the employers to work with, but you talked a lot about the influencer marketing space, which is a super saturated space at the moment. How did you build out that side of things, and what does that process look like?
This is such a good question, because I remember learning in like entrepreneurship class or whatever in college, two-sided marketplaces are like the hardest to build, right? And like there's the Uber case study, Airbnb. I like to say we're like a 3-sided marketplace. We call it a 3.
So that's why I'm asking, because this is where the power is.
Absolutely. So our 3 C's, basically companies, corporate America, content creators, candidates, right? So we have to create, essentially, like when we're thinking about the product, it's like this triangle. And how do we onboard each side at the right time, right? Like I can't get a bunch of jobs if I can't fulfill the candidates. I can't have a bunch of candidates if I don't have any jobs. But I don't want to have a bunch of influencers if there's no jobs to promote. So there's this whole like onboarding process that we're figuring out. But over the past year, I think 8 months to a year, we've really started to figure out that the key principle here is we believe if we own mind share, that's what we say, right? If the young generation of Gen Z is thinking about Pedal as the place or influencers as the place to find jobs, companies will have to come to us. I think we started in the beginning the opposite. We thought if we got a bunch of jobs from awesome companies, candidates would come flocking to us. But there's a lot of reasons that assumption's incorrect. And so we flipped it. We said, okay, let's focus on candidates. Let's focus on speaking their language. Let's focus on them getting excited for what we're building. And then we can start fulfilling jobs quicker. And as we do that, now we can onboard the amount of influencers we need to, fulfill these jobs. So that's been quite the learning process. And frankly, something that like I wasn't necessarily taught like from a 3-sided marketplace perspective. But it's been a really cool learning experience, and trying to overcome that challenge is always exciting.
You mentioned something really important to the entrepreneurial process, creating assumptions and then proving them right or wrong really quickly. You mentioned that one of the assumptions that you made was incorrect for a number of reasons. How did you find that out, and what did it look like, the timeline of how quickly you were able to understand that and then pivot accordingly?
Yeah, so you learn from your mistakes when 2 things happen. 1, the results don't work, and 2, you burn a lot of energy, time, and resources and money into it. So once you did that a few times, basically what I realized was like, I'm really good with, my CEO is really good with big picture, right? And frankly, I lean more towards that too. But I'm also like, I can see the middle, I guess you could say. discovering that next step, that step one, was really difficult. And then going from step one to step two was really difficult. And the reason was because when you go out and you discover this problem, you've created a solution in your head, but that solution is not necessarily what society needs. The data is going to tell you what the solution is. I think what's overrated in the or underrated in the entrepreneurship world is like you have to really understand the problem, not the solution. You shouldn't even, if you're going into a VC room in a pre-seed stage and you've like outlined this entire perfect product, I'm going to have a lot of questions of like, do you really know how to follow the data? And so there's been a few times like going after companies before candidates, or figuring out what side of the product to build first. Like, for example, when I send candidates to a company, there needs to be an applicant tracking system. Do I build that first, or do I build the ability for an influencer to see what candidates came through their pipeline, right? So like understanding what sides to build first was simply just the more sales you do, the more data you follow. You have to put in the manual work. Manual work is actually a blessing in disguise, because the manual work will show you exactly what order you need to start automating in order to not just create a product as quickly as possible, but create a product that can continue functioning as a machine and bringing in revenue, because you have to build and do revenue at the same time. And to understand how to do that, you have to understand to follow the data and automate the manual parts in a specific order.
So you have a co-founder.
Yes.
How did you meet? It's like a dating process for all of us, right?
Yeah. Serendipity, the universe. It was like the long story is like my sister's friend's mom's friend. Like we were like at some party or whatever, and he was telling me about this guy he had met that was starting this cool startup. I had done Venture for America, On Deck Catalyst, a few other entrepreneurship stuff. So I was looking for someone that really was suffering the same issue in COVID. Like how can we find a job? And so I called him. One of my best friends from Brown, actually, his like mom was my co-founder's like doctor or something like that. So there was this other real weird connection. But then we just vibed, and we both understood very quickly what skill sets we had and what weaknesses we had, and then we realized they complement each other pretty well. And yin and yang energy started ever since.
And you've been working together now for 3 years?
Correct. 3 years.
So we both know the number one reason that companies fail is founder breakups. So you've made it over the 1-year hump, which is a big deal. How, and like I talked about dating, it's also kind of like a marriage, but predominantly focused on finances at the end of the day. How have you navigated that relationship over time, and how has that evolved for the benefit of the business?
Yeah, that's a great question. So a lot of people say you can't start a business with friends and family. I'm not going to necessarily totally disagree with that, but I also think it's entirely possible. And I say that because I mean, me and my co-founders, we're good friends. I mean, like when something happens in my life or whatever, like it's not just a business call. He's one of the first people I call for anything, big news. I'm feeling some type of way. I need to talk to somebody. So I think that the reason that we're able to have a really close friendship, but also respect each other as like business leaders and decision makers is that we're really open, honest, transparent. No one expects that what something is said to someone else is personal. We all understand that we are fighting for something more than us, which is to change the world of recruiting and make sure that people find fulfilling, exciting jobs. Loyalty to the mission, to the vision, trust that each other will be transparent and have a solid level of integrity allows friendships and business partners, relationships to mix and match and be totally fine. And honestly, I mean, we did Techstars. I don't want to like name names and things like that, but it is unbelievable, especially during a time of COVID, how many companies implode because their co-founders realize when they spend so much time together, they don't actually like each other. And and me and Chisa, we've spent weeks together in Airbnbs or out of the country or at conferences. And that's a great sign when we realized it made us closer, not separate us apart. So I definitely think that's another underrated aspect of finding a co-founder. A lot of times they talk about like splitting up the cap table appropriately, but I think also just understanding, can you guys actually vibe as more than just business partners? Because in the very beginning, like when shit hits the fan, business aside, like you're gonna have to connect as humans. You're gonna have to figure this out. And if you can't do that, it's probably not meant to be.
I want to talk a little bit for a second. So we've talked about what you're building, who you're building it with, why are you building Pedal, and why you talked about doing On Deck, other kind of accelerator-y type programs. What was your why that led you to build this and feel lit up about building this?
A lot of people think this is like my first company, which is, I guess it's like the first real incorporated company that I started without like an older mentor, like in the 50s or whatever. Um, but there was a lot of trial and error before this of like trying to start things. So I always knew I was a creator. I always knew I was a builder. I don't have a vision of being Jeff Bezos or Mark Zuckerberg or something like that. Um, I don't see myself as being a CEO of a massive company, at least not right now. And so building and creating was always in my blood. The thing was, I never really got to a successful completion of something in terms of something exiting or getting some sort of financial return, more just like passion projects and things like that. But Venture for America, On Deck Catalyst, and Techstars for sure, they called it monetizing your passion, essentially, right? So I did a lot of work with like Gen Z. So I wrote the book, We Are Generation Z. And then I did a TEDx talk on the hidden movement of Gen Z, which was how Gen Zers are leaning towards becoming founders, social impact founders, and leveraging the private sector to solve problems that humans are facing rather than, I guess, solely relying on the government like we tend to have done in the past with some inefficient ways of governing. Like you look at Mark Cuban, you're like, look at what he's done for drug prices. And then you look at the government for the past several years, you're like, maybe the private sector can take on a new role of like solving some of these issues. So I've always had that passion. But then once I really learned how to have that system and that process of like monetizing something and learning how to scale something, I wanted to follow my heart, which in terms of what problem was really bothering me. And that was the fact that from a philosophical level, like I believe the purpose to life and like what it means to be human is to wake up with purpose and fulfillment and happiness and joy and things like that. And a lot of that comes from what you do every day. And if you wake up and you're going to a shitty job or bad job or you can't find one, that's ridiculous because that is what you're doing, for a large majority of your life. And it should be something that you're excited to wake up and do. And so from like an entrepreneur lens, that was a deep problem to solve. But from like a philosophical lens, it was like Elon Musk talks about using the private sector to progress humanity and keep humans living longer in interplanetary species and things like that. And I think like my philosophical drive was like helping people rediscover what it means to just like be a human, like wake up and excited for life. And that means being excited for what you do.
Give me a little more about the backstory of the human in front of me. Where are you from? How did you build this entrepreneurial mindset? Because this is a crazy breed of human, I think we can both admit, compared to masses. That usually requires some kind of interesting upbringing or unique perspective to the world that allows you to have such optimism and hope that what you can contribute every day with your purpose is actually moving humanity forward.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. We were definitely a crazy breed. I think three main things happened in my life that like pushed me towards this way of being. Number one was my parents, my family, my sister too. But like my family. Number two was my high school experience. And number three was a bad breakup. Shocker. So my family, I got blessed with the best parents ever. They have always been supportive of what I do. My parents, my uncles, my grandparents, all engineers and doctors. I like broke the mold. Classic Indian background, like, you know what I mean? But my parents were very supportive of what I did. And they've never told me what to do. They've always helped me walk through my decisions, understand why I'm doing what I'm doing. So I think with that mental freedom and not that like you have to pursue this track, I kept my mind open to things and was able to discover something like entrepreneurship. The second thing was my high school experience. So I grew up in Dallas. I was the only like Indian male out of 550 kids in my grade. I'm Hindu. I'm vegetarian. I played varsity football in high school in Texas. Like, that was my entire identity. I was always different. I like to say I wasn't a minority or a foreigner. I was an alien. Like they were like, there was one time I was at a team dinner. And imagine like everyone's eating like steak and stuff. And I'm eating like salad and mashed potatoes. And the waitress walks up to me and she goes, what can I order for you? And I was like, can I get nachos, but no meat? And she goes, okay, so no beef. And I go, well, and no chicken. She goes, chicken isn't meat, honey. And so like those are the times and where I live, right? Which is like, oh my God, they've never like seen this before. So I always had a unique experience, I guess, or way of observing things. That's actually what led me to write my book, We Are Generation Z. Every chapter starts with a personal anecdote or observation, but then connects it to a larger, broader trend that like helps define, Gen Z. So I think I just had that unique way of observing things and always being like uncomfortable in my skin that ultimately propelled me to becoming confident in my skin, publishing that book, finding my voice, and realizing that who I am when I'm confident and love myself and proud of myself. That was like a whole eye-opening experience. Like, whoa, this is a whole new person. And then the breakup, terrible breakup. I don't need to go through the whole story, but the point is, I came out of it, um, really having an existential crisis of like, what is my purpose here? Like, why am I doing this? And through that, read a lot of science stuff, religious scriptures. If you look at my bookshelf, like I had Jesus and Buddha and the truth and the physics of immortality and like, random stuff that I was reading. But it helped me find this belief in something greater, whether it's God or the universe or whatever. I like to say I have an irrational level of faith. And I think in order to become a startup founder, you have to have that delusion. It's honestly crazy. Like how many people tell you you're crazy, no, and all this stuff. You have to believe in yourself. But I think the other half of that is you have to have the self-awareness and humility to like deserve to be delusional, if that makes sense. So those are the things that really like created my personality, I think, that like helped me become a startup founder. But the last thing I'll say is my experience in Detroit. I was working with the owner of the Cavs, Dan Gilbert, worth a lot of billions of dollars. And I discovered what he was doing with revitalizing the city of Detroit through the private sector and entrepreneurship. He's one of those really unique billionaires in that his baby isn't one company like a Facebook or an Amazon. He has the Cavs, Quicken Loans, StockX. He owns so many Bedrock real estate companies, so many companies. And to see someone revitalize an entire city where my mom used to freak out and call Detroit like a scary ghost town when she was a consultant back in the day to what it is now of like nightlife and going to sporting events. The NFL draft was just there. That really opened my eyes to like what is possible, because I grew up in Texas thinking success, respect, money, influence was the way to be. And I still believe in a lot of that. Then I went to college at Brown, which was a crazy, 180 difference from the most conservative region in Texas to one of the more liberal universities. And learned that a lot of people wanted to have social impact, nonprofits, community. And I was caught between this, like, does money matter? Does helping people matter? And it was like this real identity crisis. And then I realized you could do both. And that's why, we started something where our financial success is directly related to how many people we find jobs. And that's exciting.
Wow, Vivek, this is why I do this, because exactly what you just talked about is so much of the meat of what I've, sorry to be ironic and the Vita.
That's funny.
Also, my last name's Burger. I don't know if you knew that, but like kind of, I also don't eat beef. So jokes on everyone.
Oh, bro, you were on fire right there.
But this is why I do this, because I'm so glad that you brought up that internal struggle of, do you make money or do you do something that has a positive impact for the world? Because I truly believe, as you said, that you can do both. Yeah. And I think, and we'll get to your fundraising journey in a few moments, but so much of when you go out and pitch and having people say no and you're crazy and all those things, I don't know if you've experienced this too. And if you have, I would love to hear more about it. But I tend to try to weave both into the story when I pitch, especially because I wouldn't build something unless it really was beneficial financially and for the good of people on the planet. And finding the right communities of investors and partners and customers to believe in that vision with you without taking pieces of the picture away in order to support you is a tough conversation to have internally as you're kind of going through all these different people that you're trying to try on a relationship with for the sake of your company. What is that journey of kind of the dilemma of both sides of pull felt like, and what have you experienced along the way that maybe has allowed you to keep committed to having both aspects in your company?
When you say both aspects, are you talking about like that money versus impact part?
Yep.
Yeah. So in the fundraising journey, in the beginning, it's funny, like coming out like Gen Zer, like I'm all like, we should help people, like social impact and make money. It's like the new wave. And then you talk to some traditional investors and they're like, social impact, bro. Like, where's the profit? Profit maximize only, and those people definitely exist. So in the beginning, we actually like fell for that. We like started to stray away from our story and mission and like who we were, until we realized that like, no, we believe in ourselves and what we're building. And if you don't see it, that's your problem. That's not mine, and I don't need you. Like, you need me because I'm changing the world. You just think you're the gatekeeper because you got money and a cool suit. You know what I mean? So we went through incredible amounts of no's. A lot of it's a learning process. I'm not going to be like a total asshole about it. Like, you learn how to become a better fundraiser, and you learn how to like um, speak to someone's understanding. That's the biggest thing that I think we took away. It was like, if they're not getting it, can I use language? Can I change, instead of getting mad at them, can I change my language to explain to them what I'm doing? And eventually start getting better and better. People start to see the vision, but they still don't get it. And that's fine. And then you keep going. And eventually, we realize that instead of talking, let's our actions speak louder than words. Let's just show them how much money we're making. So let's go make money. Let's go show them what we're doing. But here's the best part. The money gets us in the door. They want to start talking to us. The testimonial, when people find jobs and they call me crying, or like when an influencer's super excited, they're like, yo, someone in my like audience has been watching me for years, got a job. Like, that's the best feeling ever. So when an investor sees like, okay, the money's there, bro, like you can trust us now, but the impact's there. Look at what we're doing. That combination is super powerful. And now, you're confident to walk in and be like, it's like dating. Like I'm confident in myself. If this is not a match, we don't need each other. It's okay. But I hope we can figure out some sort of like commonality or relationship here. And so I think the answer to what your question really is results. Can you prove the results of the impact and the money same time? Then you go into an investor, and then, they don't see it. That's their problem.
You talked a lot about the process of talking with investors and the fundraising journey. We've teased that out a little bit. Please share with me, what does this look like from day one of bootstrapping to deciding to fundraise and going through that song and dance and the ups and downs that have taken you through to today?
Yeah. So one of the first things that we learned was when you raise money, a lot of people get complacent. And I've seen companies raise $10 million, get comfortable, and they didn't grow and they burned it. And it's impossible to raise after that. Imagine trying to go to these investors and say you burned 10 mil. So when we raised, a little bit settled in, there was some complacency. And we quickly learned that like money doesn't last forever. And, you're young in your 20s, you raise money, hundreds of thousands of dollars. You've never necessarily managed this much money before. And so we had to really learn how to, even though money comes in, you got to act like it's not necessarily there in terms of like understanding how to mitigate risk. Now, obviously you should spend the money to grow, but I think really understanding how to be financially savvy with a bunch of money that, like, again, you've never really had in your 20s was something very important for us to learn. I think the first, Mark Cuban says this best. He's like, look, you don't need to raise that much money to start a company nowadays. And I think he's right. And I think there's a broader conversation to have about like the value out of VCs in general. But with what you can do with AI and tools and softwares, what you needed like 5 people in the past to do, you can do with 1, maybe even 10, you could do with 1. Also, a lot of companies can actually gain traction before raising a bunch of money, unless it's like super, super tech heavy or something like that. So I think learning to raise not that much money. And then what we did is, and it's actually currently open. So if anyone wants to invest as little as $250, you can invest in our WeFunder because we believe that if we raise from friends and family, you have far more pressure on yourself to not let them down than if you take some stranger's money. And when you see people buy into you and give you their money, like, the last thing you want to do is let them down. Like that is, and you're going to do everything you can to make sure that this works out. So that was really incredible to see our supporters, our friends, our family buy into this. And honestly, speaking to a lot of these VCs who don't understand these intersections of culture and HR, content and tech, and like Gen Z and tech founder, that's like a whole new universe of thinking and words and value propositions that like some investors don't necessarily understand. But you know who does understand it? That unemployed Gen Z candidate that like has been unemployed for 6 months and graduated from a great school and has a solid resume and applied to 200 jobs and didn't hear back from 198 of them. They understand. They invest in us. What about HR people, recruiters that are like, I keep going to all these campus fairs. I keep posting all these things. It takes me 90 days to fulfill something. We're fueled by nepotism. I can't get diverse candidates. They understand the problem. Influencers who, if you're not part of that 1% of influencers, you're really not making an income that can help support you in terms of like a primary revenue source. So our whole thing is we're going to build that middle class. We're going to take that recruiting budget and inject it into the creator economy and remove it from all of the other garbage that they spend it on. And influencers get it. They're like, oh my God, another revenue stream. Plus I can help people find jobs. I'm in. And so they invest in us. And so the people that really suffer from the problem, even though they might have less money, when they come together, now I have similar money I could have raised from angels or VC, but I got all these people's networks, not one or two. I got all these people bought in. I don't want to let them down. And they're actually suffering the problem. So now they're going to become my salespeople. They're going to become my champions, my influencer recruiters. And so I think the best thing that we learned was VCs are overrated. Still could be necessary, but I think they're a little overrated. Angels and community equity fundraising platforms are probably the most efficient route in the beginning. And I'm glad that we discovered that probably a little later than we should have or could have. But yeah, it's all part of the journey.
That's a beast in and of itself to navigate all these platforms. I know I get reached out to by at least one or two a week. And that's a whole time suck in and of itself to go through all of these. How have you vetted that process and found the right combination of partners for Petal?
As a founder, especially in the early stages, you network a lot, right? You get into tech Twitter, you go to all the New York tech events, LA tech events, and so by doing that, now tons of people that have participated in pretty much every program you could hero or use every platform that you've thought of. And so that's a lot of the vetting is which founders do we trust? Which humans do we trust? And then can we get their testimonials, what they went through? That's how we decided on Techstars. That's how I decided on Deck. That's how we decided on WeFunder, and God bless WeFunder. They've been amazing. So that's been the way that we've vetted. What's interesting though is that's not how you should vet for when you hire. That was another learning experience, and nothing bad about our hiring experiences, but we've learned that someone else's word on someone is great to get them in the door to see if that they're can actually provide value to your company. But solely taking someone's word on a person from a hiring perspective, we've learned is not necessarily the best route. I need to see that you can provide value specifically to Petal before we can make a judgment on if we can hire you. So that's been a learning thing as well. But I think the main thing is we call it a vibe check, but it's really, can we feel that even as a co-founders or early hires, your skill sets are very important, obviously, but can you vibe with the culture? Are you not a culture fit, but a culture add? That's the cliche they throw around that I think has a lot of meaning to it. Really trusting that you're fighting for something greater than yourself. And honestly, even the team. We're fighting for people to find jobs and wake up and have a fulfilling life. That is the mission of Petal, and making it fun. When someone says I'm looking for a job or I'm unemployed, there is never a smile with that. There's no excitement with that. It should be fun. I quit my job. I got fired. Congrats. Let's go find another awesome one in 2 days. That's how it should be. So that's been, something that we really made sure that we can assess people is that selflessness, at least to fight for something greater.
You have talked a lot about the fundraising journey now. I've learned a ton from you, and I hope other people have too, especially about vetting products and services out there for fundraising, because that market is so saturated at the moment. A lot of bad actors. I'm sure you've come across them too. But a piece of this that we haven't talked about is how you can have that hope as a founder and your vision and your confidence and your delusion, but you also have to pick yourself up every single time that there is a no and keep plowing forward. So where does that resilience come from for you, and how have you evolved your process over time?
Being resilient is not easy. I'm a very optimistic person. I have that irrational level of faith that I talked about, but energy and everything's going great is not what they're feeling inside. One of the things that you have to keep reminding yourself is that reason. Why do you have the right to believe in yourself more than the person telling you no? That's the fair, objective question. Is I'm not better than you. I don't think I'm smarter than you. I don't think I have, whatever. It's, can I really objectively understand what you're saying, where your feedback? Can I assess where you're coming from? And can I do that with myself? And without any judgment, and then can I make the decision that I deserve to believe in myself more than what you think of me? And if you keep going through that process and you try to make it more objective and less emotional, and you come to a somewhat logical, there's still some delusion and, belief in oneself, but if you can come to this understanding that they're not seeing what I'm seeing, you keep going, and you get to a point where ultimately the results speak for itself. And when you can see your idea start working, even on a micro scale, like I remember the very first time we did this, we worked with one influencer. We got 20 candidates. It was like super low scale. And it was amazing to see that it worked. We converted a viewer into a candidate that was hireable. We did it in like 5 days. It was super cheap. That's all we needed to see. Some other people were like, that's not good enough. It needs to be bigger. This is not going to work. And, all of that, again, like we understand where they're coming from. But when you see the idea come to life and you start to see that vision being created in front of you, sometimes you need to just trust that like you and your co-founders are the only ones that can see it. Going through that emotional roller coaster is very difficult. It's very important. I have a life coach. I talk to her every week. I've seen her for 2 years. I need that. My parents are like my subsidiary like coaches. I rely on my friends. And the one thing I mentioned with my co-founder is we need to put the BS aside. A lot of co-founders or just founders in general, they're BSing you and they're lying and they're not being open about the struggle. And we've said in our team, like, don't come with a happy face all the time. Like, we need to struggle together. Like, that was the statement that we made. Don't let like personal life necessarily get involved and hamper your work efficiency or whatever, but let's be honest about what you're feeling and going through so that like everyone is on the same page, or else some people start feeling emotions that they don't want to share because they're like, well, everyone else feels fine. I don't feel fine. And that's not, authentic and transparent. So I think just being open, honest, vulnerable, not feeling weird about it, leaning on the right people, finding people you can trust, and reminding yourself that you deserve to believe in yourself is really the way to keep going.
Honesty and transparency are huge things that you just discussed that I think you're so right are issues in corporations often, or early stage startups, especially because there's so much pressure to have everything externally look great to so many different audiences that it's really easy to get caught up in this kind of bubble in your mind that it's all okay and ignore the swimming around of anxiety and depression at times and chaos that comes with just all the ups and downs. What is that vulnerability that you encourage your team to have to not show up with the happy face every day? What does that look like in practice? And how have you learned how to better create a culture that fosters that kind of openness?
Yeah. So one of the first things was it's kind of contrary to what I think most people are taught, but we want everyone to understand the decision. Like, we don't have a single decision maker. I mean, we do. It's our CEO, but like, he's very rarely going to make a decision. I mean, I don't think he's ever done it. Like, made a decision without really understanding everyone's perspective. And I don't even think he's made a decision where everyone else disagreed and it was just him. So we're very much, everyone needs to understand the vision of the company. No one's going to micromanage you. You need to figure out how you can be the best in your role. And when everyone is aligned with the rationale behind a big decision or where the vision or where the company's going, that's been great for us. All of a sudden, people feel like with more information they have, the more clear conclusions they can make. That's been very powerful. The other thing is we call each other a lot one-on-one now. So we have a lot of team meetings and we started dailies. So we meet every single day. We used to meet like maybe every other day or something like that. But we make sure to talk every day, even if the updates are 5-10 minutes, the other 15 minutes, we're just going to talk about life. We give ourselves that 30 minutes to all communicate. And the one-on-ones, just making sure that like everyone is accessible at all times. I call my CEO. He calls me at 2, 3, 4 in the morning. People answer. No one ever feels like they're pestering somebody. And so I just called my CEO the other day and I was like, hey man, I'm feeling this type of way about this thing. We need to like figure this out. And he's in Brazil being an uncle for the first time. He gets to see his niece and nephew and he's going to take that call and he's going to sit there and talk to me about it. We're going to figure it out. And so that's kind of the love, bond, friendship, family vibe that we've created where we all trust each other to just be honest. And it's just, I would rather you over communicate than under communicate. And so we've started implementing that.
How do you account for the humanness of Vivek in all of this? Because I think it's so easy. As a founder, you're expected in many respects to be a robot, that you have to fight for and lean on the rituals and habits that make you human to get through it.
That's a really good question. I don't know if this is going to be clear because I've never really thought about it like this or I guess put it in words, but it's like you have to make sure the human, like the work elevates the humanness. So like I can't lose who I am in my work. Like my work should help me discover who I am and make me a better person. And so this process of like trying to start this company and it being viewed as my baby has made me learn a lot about myself. And part of the human journey is that growth, is the self-awareness, is the introspection, is the growth of you as a person. I think I played football growing up, like I said. I think football and starting a company were the two perfect examples in my life of like this microcosm of life and like how life works, how certain life principles work and things like that on a much larger scale. And so, for example, one thing that I learned about myself that has really changed the way that I view things is the distinction between a problem solver and a decision maker. And I used to think I was a really good decision maker. I took a personality test once and it put decision making at my last, out of 32 character traits, put me the last one. And I was like, what the heck? Like, that is such a diss. Like, I'm a great decision maker. No, turns out I'm a great problem solver. And the difference is I see a problem and I stand in the perspective of a problem and I will assess a solution in comparison to the problem. And then I will say that solution is best. We need to go for it. I think that's what makes me a great startup founder, is that if we both discover a problem, I bet you I could find a better solution, or at least I could compete with you. A decision maker, though, doesn't stand in the problem. They stand in the perspective of the solution, and they view a solution in comparison to other solutions. And how does it impact things that aren't just related to the problem? And I think, I mean, obviously my CEO is also a fantastic startup founder, but I think that's what makes him a better CEO or decision maker than myself. And so having the humility to be like, oh my God, I'm actually a terrible decision maker. Like, I make decisions before I actually have all the information, because I used to think deciding on the best solution was deciding or making a decision, but it's not. It's simply picking the best solution. And so reinterpreting my lens of life, like in general, and seeing where I'm not necessarily making decisions, I'm just problem solving, opened up like a whole new universe and way of thinking for me that, again, only came from becoming a startup founder. But that was a way that my work has actually helped me become more human and grow versus the other way around.
Wow, my mind is blown. I've never thought about it like this.
Appreciate it. I don't know if I ever got that question. So I was like, I need to think about that.
No, but that's so true. And I'm rolling through my brain in some of the founders that I've worked with and myself and trying to assess, okay, where do I sit? Where do they sit? And you're so right. It's oftentimes somebody is one or the other, and you want the reflection of the mirrors around you to push back the opposite perspective of the one that's your strength.
Totally.
How does that look practically? Like in your day-to-day life, what are the things that you do to keep yourself centered to be a strong problem solver?
Yeah. So I think the first thing, I need to have a clear head. I think Steve Jobs said it. See, I used to fear that I was an overthinker, and I still think I lean that way versus like over. And someone told me in Detroit, they go, you don't want to become a philosopher, right? Like, you want to be a doer. And I was like, that's really true. But at the same time, I feel like there's very intellectually challenging problems that you need to solve. And Steve Jobs said it best in a little interview. I think it was him. He was like, sometimes you forget as a startup founder, you have to solve really intellectually challenging problems before you really know what exactly to do. Sometimes you learn through doing, but sometimes you also learn through problem solving in your head first and then doing. And so it's very important that I keep a clear head. If I embark on other passions or hobbies or things, I actually try not to bring a creator building startup mindset to it, versus more of like it being a meditative, more mindless, but like flow state type of thing. Because I like to keep that clear so I can always like think about, where we're going as a company and what are the things that I need to solve and things like that. So morning walks, always like to clear my head and movement, action. I pace a lot. I think out loud. I talk out loud. So I need a lot of movement. I draw lots of diagrams and stuff. So I used to put it all in my head, but now I'm like a big drawer, and I'm actually a terrible drawer. So like only I can understand it, but I like to draw shapes and sizes and concepts and things. I'm very like abstract, but I think learning how to clear my head. I also meditate. I think fitness is really important, like Pilates, yoga, going to the gym, running, things like that. But just really focusing on making sure that I'm present in the moment and that my mind is always like thinking about the priority here, which is pedal. And when I'm engaged in other activities, it's more to like cleanse myself and become present again. This might be a hot take. I think sometimes people who preach like taking care of their mental health, especially in the startup world, speak sometimes from a perspective of like your mental health time and your human time is separate from your startup time. And I think you need to make sure that they're both actually working together. So like when I go on a walk and I clear my mind or I'm meditating, that is like my mental health time, but it's also helping me think about solving problems for my startup at the same time. And I'm not totally detaching the two, if that makes sense. And Mark Cuban, he was hilarious. He goes, look, if you care about mental health, I hope you do, because I will kick your ass. And I think there's a lot of truth to it. I don't think it's entirely true, but I think like the whole point of separating mental health and me being happy and fulfilled and my work, you got to figure out how to combine those two. And so, I think that's been a learning process too.
100%. I call it work-life integration, not work-life
I
balance.
love it. Love it. Yeah. No compartmentalization. You got to learn how to be human in everything.
Absolutely. Absolutely. What is the best piece of advice you've ever received?
So this changes over time, but I think recently the best piece of advice that I've gotten, language is probably the most powerful tool that we have, and it paints your reality and expands your opportunities and limits your possibilities. Learning how to use the right language in your head, learning how to use language to communicate to other people's understanding, learning how to put powerful value propositions into powerful language. I think I've really understood and seen the results of words and speaking to people and building a movement, building the energy, and realizing that when I step out of a certain paradigm of thought and I embrace another one, tons of doors open up. And it all starts with the language that I choose to use with myself and with others. So I think that's been a really important thing. Is it's really underrated how you just treat people and the language that you use and the energy that you bring. And I think that the more I focus on that, the more everything else seems to come together. So
Oof, that hits the soul for real. I think about that all the time. Just the aspect of, I call these like our flesh-filled sacks oftentimes. Like I like view myself as like a brain that's just like in a body. I lean more towards the brain in my body, which is probably not a healthy thing to do. But the reason that I bring that up is because so much I feel oftentimes that this world of what we have to utilize for communication is so limiting. Like how crazy is it that in at least in the English language, for this example, you have 26 letters to use in the entire universe of experience that we have as humans to articulate what you're feeling and get other people to pick up on or understand that. And so I think how the power of how you use that language, to your point, is the magic of how we connect with each other. I'm so glad you brought that up.
no, I love that you see it, because when you zoom out and you look at it, everything at the end of the day is just people. Government is just a bunch of people. Companies are just a bunch of people. Like war treaties, they're all negotiated by people. Like that's all. When you boil it down, it's just a bunch of human interaction. And the thing that makes humans interact is language, whether it's verbally or body language or whatever. But when you get really down to the nitty gritty, like language is the fundamental thing that like makes everything work, operate, and the reality you create. And I think it's just like important to remember that that's completely in your power. It's the most powerful thing, and you have power to control it. That's pretty cool. It's pretty freeing. And so I think re-understanding that and owning that control and power was something that made me feel very powerful.
I think even the example that you just gave of going to war, I think my brain flashed to this clip that I saw recently of a panel that Sarah Blakely, the founder of Spanx, and Mr. Wonderful were on together. And he's talking about how, have you seen this clip?
Uh,
Okay, he's talking about how business is war. And she cuts him off and she says, I have to be honest, I completely disagree with you. And that's not how I view business. I view it as humans coming together, trying to connect, similar to the kind of theory that we're talking about here. And I know that we're getting a little bit ethereal, but I think it's an important conversation to have, especially from a Gen Z expert. I would love to know your thoughts on. I feel like there's more and more flavors of how to run a business, what that looks like. And that's part of this podcast, is I wanted to shine light on for people all of the different experiences and ways that you can do the same thing. There's no one path to success. And so I think your point of human connection is a really important one. But what are you seeing from the Gen Z perspective and the shifts that they are bringing to the private sector in terms of the types of ways of going about business and collaborating with other people that might be different than how business as usual is often talked about today?
That's a great question. I'm gonna shamelessly shout out my TED Talk too, my TEDx talk, the hidden movement of Gen Z. I actually basically that's the talk. I go over that. But like I said, great question. So you asked my best piece of advice. My worst piece of advice that I ever got was if you've already thought about it, someone's probably already done it. That is so false. And even if it is true, first of all, having an idea and executing on it, two completely different things. And if you have executed on it, oftentimes the first person there's a lot of mistakes you can learn from them. But what Gen Z is doing that's actually creating a level of competition that I don't think the private sector, the startup world has necessarily seen before, is everyone talks about, okay, a startup is a product or a service, right? What we're starting to prove, it's also a business model. So if I can reinvent a business model and provide a similar service or product, I might beat you. And so what we're starting to do is starting to integrate different business models, TOMS, the classic, example, and it's getting deeper now with Gen Z, but like the business model, okay, you buy shoes, I'm gonna send that one off. Is that profit maximization? Absolutely not. But did that help with branding? Did that help with connecting to the values of Gen Z? Like, yes, absolutely at that time, right? What we're doing, for example, is no one's discovered a business model to hire or to recruit young talent in bulk. Every headhunter, every recruiting agency is mid-level or C-suite because they get 30% of the cut. That's always been the business model, right? We've introduced, and like paying per head. That's always been the business model. So why would I start a recruiting company to find you young talent where I get paid 1 to 3K per head when I could go to a C-suite, find you one CEO and get paid 100K and be done for the year, right? That's the business model. It's always existed. So no one's ever done it. Well, we reinvented the business model. We're like, hold on, we can do this by using content as a tool. Now we can charge not based off of per head, but based off of the job posting. We can pay influencers a certain way. So by doing that, a whole new world of opportunity came up. And so I think that's like one of the things people aren't necessarily talking about is, can you do what someone's doing with a better business model? The other thing is collaboration versus competition. I don't disagree necessarily completely with Mr. Wonderful or Mark Cuban and people like that. This is a dog eat dog world. Like, let's not like I think people glorify the founder journey. I mean, it is intense. I think there's a difference between a startup founder and a early employee, and there's nothing wrong with the difference, but like, understand that there's a big difference with the startup founder. There's this new desire to figure out ways, kind of like what you discussed with your friend, of working together, not to create the new Silicon Valley, right, of competition, but to create a new type of way of thinking where like we can work together and prop each other up. And so a lot of Gen Z's first mentality is like, how can we collaborate, right? I've seen people, in fact, we just did this this morning. I'm not going to name the name, but we reached out to someone that everyone would consider a traditional competitor. And we're like, hold on, wait a minute. Here's what you're good at. Here's what we're good at. And I said at the end of the call, I was like, look, I know you think we're traditional competitors, but we're coming here with a collaborative spirit. And I think I see a way that this could work. Let's figure out a partnership. New partnership revenue models, also like business models, are coming to fruition. And all of a sudden, people are like, wait, you guys are going to be competitors. They're going to like stomp you. No, maybe we work together and I provide you value. You provide me value. We both grow. Now I have an acquisition channel. I think the competitive versus collaborative spirit is like, how can we work together is definitely a big thing. The last thing, again, not to get too ethereal or whatever, but I think a lot of products and services, especially during the .com boom and the tech and all that, is efficiency, optimization, money, and that's kind of been what startups and companies look like. Now we look at the Mark Cubans, we look at hopefully one day we could say that we cut unemployment in half, or we help people like find jobs in 30 minutes versus 30 days. So there's a new understanding that we can actually use the private sector to not just make things more efficient, but to literally help human beings rediscover what it means to be a human. It means you're healthy, you're happy, like you can afford healthcare, you can have a good job, you can find the person that you love, like you're excited to wake up. Like, we're starting to see that we can make money and do good things at the same time. And I know like media hypes up, like, again, not to get too political, but like this idea of abandoning capitalism. My whole thing was like, we can reform it. We can make it a way where you can actually help a bunch of people make a bunch of money. And that was not a concept that like was really taught or preached. And it sounds so simple, but I think it takes a unique life experience, a unique generation, a unique mentality and heart to discover that is the thing to do. And thank God for Gen Z. I mean, so many of us are embarking on that journey, and a lot of us will be successful, especially in the beginning, because that's the journey of a startup founder. But it is really, really amazing. And it's kind of like, not to be all like cheesy, but rekindle my faith in humanity that like media might hype up the world as some crazy, hateful place. But the world that I live in, I'm seeing people build some of the most incredible things and helping so many people and getting rich and too. So, it's a pretty unbelievable thing that Gen Z's initiated with the startup world.
What does success look like to you? And when do you know that you'll have quote unquote made it for Vivek?
Oh God. Well, I don't know if I'll ever know I made it, but I think I want to be healthy. I want to take care of my body and feel like I'm just a healthy person. I want to have genuine relationships with my family, my cousins. They're getting older. We're now like friends. I'm not just their older cousin. That's been cool. And just keeping in touch with my friends. And by being financially free, I don't really want a lot of stuff. So I want to be able to afford what I want, so being financially free, having some sort of ritual or like tangible proof that I am still engaged with religion, philosophy, meditation, yoga, whatever, so that none of that success takes me away from who I really am. But if you package all that up together, again, I know this is cheesy, but if I can wake up and just be happy and feel like I don't have any stresses and that I'm a good person, that I'm good to go. Like I'm ready to just feel like every day is a party.
We've covered a lot of ground today, and I so appreciate your honesty and your authenticity and your hot takes, because I think that actually hot takes are just a way to spark honest conversation people aren't talking about. But is there anything that I haven't asked you that you feel like would be important for this audience to know, or any kind of guidance or tips or tricks that have been super helpful to you? Any direction you want to take it?
Don't be a startup founder because everyone's telling you to do it or it looks cool. It's a new hot thing. It is not as amazing and fun and glorified as everyone makes it seem. It is an emotional roller coaster. You don't have financial stability. Everyone's going to tell you no. You're going to doubt yourself. You're going to question faith. You're going to lose nights with friends or social life. You're never really going to know if all of it in the back of your head you're thinking is a complete waste of and energy and money. So you're going to go through all of that. And if you can go through all of that and you embrace it, and pressure is something where it helps you perform, then go give it a shot. But don't do it because you think I can help a bunch of people. It's really fun. I'm going to meet a lot of cool people. I'll be in media. It's an easy way to make money. You got to embrace the pain and you got to be excited for it. Everyone thinks about that corner office. No one thinks about the pain it took to get there. Everyone thinks about being Kobe or LeBron. No one thinks about the pain to get there. Everyone thinks about the success of Mark Cuban and Mark Zuckerberg and Dan Gilbert and all these people. No one thinks about the pain to get there, and it's painful. And you got to be ready for it. But deep down, we're crazy enough to love it, and we are crazy enough to believe in ourselves. And if that's who you are, give it a shot. But don't convince yourself you are that person if you're not, and that's totally fine.
Preach, 100%. Plug yourself. Where can we find you? What's next? All the fun things.
Cool. So, my book, We Are Generation Z, if you want to check that out. My TED Talk, The Hidden Movement of Gen Z, if you want to check that out. And then if you want to just follow me or anything like that, my Instagram is Vivek Pandit 108. 108 is my lucky spiritual number, universal number. And then our website is pedal.com. So it's PEDUL, but pronounced like pedal, like lotus petal. PEDUL, because EDU is in the middle and bridges the gap between P and L, purpose and life. So our P and L are capitalized, and then it's PEDUL.com. So that's where you can find us. If you want to, if you're looking for jobs, create an account. Once you create an account, you'll start discovering jobs on social media as you're scrolling through TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, things like that. And then you should be able to apply really quickly. But I'm happy to connect with anybody. I love meeting new people, and I hope everyone had a great time listening, and please reach out.
Oh my gosh, there's going to be a lot of reach outs. I feel like you brought so much yummy, soul-filled knowledge and insight to this podcast. Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. These are great questions. These are some of the best questions I've had. That was awesome. I appreciate it.
Oh, I'm so glad. I'm so glad. And that wraps up another episode of Confessions of a Founder. I hope you enjoyed today's episode and took away valuable insights from our incredible guest. Don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and share this episode with someone in your life who could use a little entrepreneurial inspiration. We'll be back next Tuesday with another founder who's ready to share their story, their struggles, and the lessons they've learned along the way. So be sure to tune in, and until then, keep chasing your vision and embracing the journey. Thanks for listening.